We're talking Santa today. Or whatever Christmassy thing you want to get into. What about you guys? What are your experiences with ever having believed in Santa or not? Or is it good to do this to kids?
I'll just throw that out.
Just
I
whatever.
totally believed in Santa, and didn't at all when my parents sort of let me in to the secret, even though by that age it wasn't a secret anymore. There was this moment of inviting me to the adult world where people, in fact, are complicated, and so I didn't feel like I had been lied to. I felt like I was being invited to the adult world, and felt really proud, and it was this cool moment with my parents. So, we often cast it as lying, but in adult life, there's all kinds of things we don't tell people. There's all kinds of things we don't say to people, all in the name of being kind or other sorts of things. So it gets cast as a lie, and I think that's unfortunate. Adult life means we don't say a lot of things, and that was a cool thing to be invited to by my parents.
Not everybody in here grew up with the Santa tradition. Justine said, "What about one for Jewish people?"
Well, I'm actually, so I'm a mix, but mom was Jewish, which in Jewish tradition means I'm Jewish. But like I was real into Christmas stuff.
Tell us about your experience with Santa Claus.
Yeah. So at my house, my mom was Jewish. My dad was non-denominationally Christian. But really we were a very secular home. And Santa wasn't really a part of our deal. Like we did Hanukkah and Christmas, but very, very secularized. I have no honest memory of a belief in Santa, and I like all of my knowledge of the Santa myth came from movies and TV and my friends. Oh, I do remember something. I remember my parents telling me, like, don't tell the other kids Santa's not real, because like they really believe in it. It's a really big deal, so like you got to keep it a secret.
That's almost like a Jewish holiday rite of passage, because I've heard that from so many Jewish friends of mine who are like, yeah, we had to be real careful around Christmas time. Real tight-lipped. We had to lock it up.
Mm-hmm.
I got in a lot of trouble for saying that Santa wasn't real. I was, I think, 12, and I was in the car with my friend, her mom, and her sister, who was 11. And by that point, I assumed that everybody, like, by 11, yeah. And so I said something, and instead of saying, well, no, Santa is real, you've just gotten a little jaded, or whatever she could have said, she stopped the car in the middle of the street, turned around and started screaming her head off, telling me I was a horrible monster, and then called my mother and told her I was a horrible monster. So, that was fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for Christmas, though you didn't ask for it, sounds like you got a disproportionate punishment for doing something harmless.
I did.
She made the naughty list.
Yeah.
I did. I mean, pretty much every year. But but my mom actually did. My sister and I were pretty skeptical kids, and my mom had this thing that she told us that made me actually believe in Santa for a little while. She said, well, look, I know everyone says he isn't real, and maybe he's not, but I just can't get this thing out of my head. When I was a kid, I looked out the window on Christmas night, and I just caught out of the corner of my eye these lights going over the house, and I heard these bells. Now, it could have been anything. It could have been people caroling. It could have been, but you just can't explain it. So maybe he is real. And we were like, well, that seems perfectly logical. So that's how she got us.
I was a little younger than that, but it still felt like I believed later than all my peers. And I know exactly when I knew for sure. It was we were visiting my grandparents' house, and I went to the closet where we normally kept some toys that I would play with. It was before some of the cousins had gotten there, and there was this Fisher-Price farm set, and I brought it out. And it's like, what's this? It was with the toys to play with. And I remember my grandfather, oh, no. And he's putting this away in there, and later my mom said, well, Santa leaves some things early. It's like, no, I knew. That took care of it. I'll pretend to believe it, because the longer you pretend to believe it, the longer you keep getting the extra Santa presents.
I remember being very young and totally enjoying Santa. I think one of the highlights for me in the holiday season was always when Santa would come by on the back of a fire engine down the street. You know, I lived in Philadelphia at the time, and it was, you know, he'd throw out candy canes. It was always kind of just exciting. And I don't remember ever feeling disillusioned at learning anything new, but just similarly like into a new phase of belief. And, you know, I think he's important. You know, it's one of those things where it's in so much of the culture, regardless of what you believe or don't believe. I think he holds something. You know, he's at least an image or maybe an archetype of something for people.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in kids at such a young age, most of their world is fantasy and play anyway. So it kind of goes alongside where it's not necessarily lying to the kids. And I think kids kind of guide the parents when they're ready to be let in on the secret. I know for me, for my youngest daughter, when I knew it was time just to fess up to her is when she came back from school from the Christmas break or winter break. And she wanted to know why some of the kids weren't very good because they didn't get what they asked for. They didn't, and so it's just more of that. So there's that socioeconomic piece to it, and it's kind of like, well, and that was tough. So I just was kind of honest with her and said, you know, Santa is kind of real in the spirit of things, the spirit of giving and generosity, and it doesn't always mean the best gifts and the most gifts. It's there's other ways to express it, and he's kind of like a cartoon in our mind. That it was difficult, but you know, she got it. My wife being much more religious than that, and she kind of wants to cut it all out because more of her belief is that it's more paganism than anything, and I'm not. I kind of.
Am I allowed to cheer for paganism?
Yeah, this is open.
No pagans.
So it's kind of, but it brings up that multicultural piece of Santa Claus and Sinterklaas and skin color of Santa and what that means to all sorts of Americans and everywhere around the world. Because I do agree with what William said. I think he is an archetype. I think he's just a representation of the human consciousness or unconscious.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on William's notion of Santa being an archetype. Santa is like this unbridled approach thing, right? In other words, we as parents or caregivers or whatever give, and kids take, and we are totally comfortable with the story we tell them about him coming down the chimney. It's this total joyous approach phenomenon. And of course, life is much more complicated than that. So when you go all in on approach, you're vulnerable. And I think it's those vulnerabilities that kids and some people pick up on that we're bringing into the space when we talk that way. But I argue that this is a developmental opportunity for kids to deal with their vulnerability, right? To manage it. And so when we cast it as a lie or something like that, we lose the opportunity to make it more complex, make it and I would say a rite of passage for the kids, right? To make that move from total approach to, whoa, wait a minute, the world's complicated. I got to do some work here. So,
Alex, what about you? As long as we've gotten into our Santa stories, did you ever see any evidence of Santa that other kids didn't believe?
Yes, I did. With that very leading question that you know to be a yes.
It was my fault. It was my idea.
Was it your idea? I was like, who actually did it?
It was my idea. Well, I guess I'll tell what we did.
Okay.
We left reindeer and sled tracks outside my parents' house.
Wow.
And my dad was having fun making the tracks with the stick and leaving the reindeer hoof prints. And then hey, the kids saw these, and then what?
Evidence.
Yeah, I say Alex had evidence.
It was pretty.
So cool.
You had reason to hang on to this belief because you saw the evidence.
And so I hung on to it longer than I would have otherwise, because there were a number of times where I was like, I don't know about it, but I saw the evidence. There was a
Right,
happy
Christmas CSI. It's right there.
Yeah. So yeah, and I would have kids. I'd be like, I know, I saw the reindeer hoof prints and the sled tracks, and they're like, nah, man, you didn't. It's a lie. And I'd be like, what? No. So I don't remember how long I continued believing in Santa Claus, but I know that it was elongated because of that.
It was I was very careful in how I dealt with this. I never lied to him about Santa, but I also was not going to tell the full truth either. And everybody would ask, I would give this wording on, here's the reason and why I can't just answer that question. And he accepted it. But I still remember finally one day we were in a car and you asked some question, because you're trying to figure out the logic of Santa. And what I said was, Alex, I thought you had the Santa Claus thing figured out already.
Oh,
And
I remember
that was like, that was your assurance. Oh, okay, I know.
I remember that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found all the presents and we had an attic. I used to go up there, found them all wrapped. But the best part was my mom used to write in pencil on the bottom on the wrapping paper what was in it. So,
Oh.
and I dragged my sister up there. I was like, you have to see what mom's going to get us. So she's like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I'm like, get up here. So younger. I'm not sure she's forgiven me for that.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to play the Santa game with our kid. We talked about it and we're like, we want the credit for the presents we're giving him.
Yeah.
Well, you were also raised by a mother who resented giving the credit to a fictional fat man.
There's that too. There's a lot of different factors. Also, additionally, while I enjoyed the magic of the sled tracks and the hoof prints when I was little, when I was younger and still believing in Santa because of those hoof prints and sleigh tracks, I don't like that because I feel duped. So there's a whole mix of it.
Oh, this is so fascinating from a family therapy perspective.
And how do kids get to believe in this day of the internet, in this age of communication, when information is just there?
I mean, look, we've still got flat earthers. We've still got people convinced Bigfoot is real. We've still got UFO believers. So like, people will.
Well, that's real though.
People will believe what
In the news says it is.
Probably depends on how guarded the parent is with technology and the age of the kid.
Is it healthy? Why do we do this? Why do we do the Santa myth?
I mean, it's nice having a little additional belief in something nice and magical, even for a little bit. So I mean, it's a double-edged sword. Because like with me, like I would not go back and change the hoof print sled track thing, but I look back recognizing like that it is a double-edged sword. So like, but there are a few opportunities to where society as a whole agrees this is a little bit of magic that you can instill in a person's life to try to make it nicer than it is.
Yeah, I think part of it was like, I'm a big fan of fairy tales and mythology and how they affect people, like how they instill ideas of morality and lessons. And we have this one, and I don't feel like it's that different. The only difference here is I think that you're asked to believe in something that can interact with you. So it's not, like I'm imagining, when you're talking to about the Greek gods, say, to people who believe this, then they do interact with you, particularly the Greek gods. But, but this is a real, like, direct, like, he will come to your house and leave crap as long as you give him carrots and cookies. My father ate so many cookies.
Carrots and cookies?
Oh, carrots are for the reindeer. Yeah, they're for the reindeer. I'm a crazy animal nut, and so we had to leave stuff for the animals too.
I see.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, we had carrots, but only like 1 or 2 for 8 reindeer. I don't, I never really thought about that.
Because they're getting a lot of carrots from a lot of different houses. So it all adds up cumulatively. Meanwhile, Santa Claus is like, I hate these cookies.
More cookies.
He has an endless hunger. He's insatiable for
He's
cookies.
Speaking of that, he's so unhealthy. The man smokes a pipe eats nonstop cookies and dairy.
Yeah, and then he hibernates 364 days of the year. So
Yeah.
He's a
And
magical being.
yes, and he has really red cheeks and a really red nose. And in some traditions, you leave like sherry out for him. So he drinks a lot. He
ooh,
eats nothing but sugar and dairy, and he smokes. Just
this
saying.
drunken
Yeah.
guy breaking in your house and taking all the cookies. Hey kids, you get a box of
So-
tissue.
So I feel like we're veering. Before we veer, I want to say one more nice thing.
Okay.
Before we veer, I think this is a really charming social construct we have all agreed on. You know, that adults are like, no, this is a magical time for children, and let's not steal that from them. And you know, as we veer off into sad times, like this is kind of the first memory a lot of young people have of being lied to. So that's kind of rough.
Yeah.
You know, like Alex, you were saying, this is the first time young people remember like having been duped.
Yeah.
But before that realization, like it's this very beautiful social construct. We have all decided that children deserve magic, and that, you know what, we're going to give them Santa, we're going to give them tooth fairies, and, you know, kids, you're allowed to live in this fantasy world. And then when you age a little bit, we're going to give you a lot of crap for believing in fictional characters. But
Yeah. Such a strange phenomenon.
So I think kids are going to believe regardless. It may not be Santa. It's going to be something. You know, their cognitions are just not as constrained as ours, and that's what development is about. I would argue that I can even believe in Santa, but in order for me to do that in a way that's authentic, I have to get out of this objective subjective divide that Western psychology tends to be embroiled in, right? What I like to say is that dreams and bricks are of the same stuff made. So I'm not a clinician, but if I were a clinician, people come to me with suffering. People don't come to me and says, I have a neurochemical imbalance, right? They say I'm suffering. And if we don't have a worldview that lets that suffering be as real as a brain or a brick, I think we've got a problem. So for me, Santa's just as real as any dream. And dreams are not unreal. They're real in different ways than bricks, but they're still real. So part of what I like about the Santa thing is it forces us into the conversation as adults about what's reality and how are we going to talk about it, and then how are we going to talk about it with our kids. And, you know, as I said, I love things complicated. So I'm going to make it complicated and find ways for Santa to be real.
Although, you know, there is an element of morality, I guess we have to accept about it, but that a lot of those stories are about when someone's lost the spirit of Christmas, right? Or somebody's done something that is not in the norm. So we get kind of caught up on some of that kind of stuff, I think, in an interesting way. But I can clearly say I'm always amazed at what people are able to believe, even in the face of overwhelming facts in the other direction. So, yes, I believe even if it's on the internet that he doesn't exist, kids and whoever are still going to believe stuff.
Yeah, I stopped believing pretty early, so I didn't really get the like I'm being lied to thing. I just assumed my parents, maybe it's when I grew up, because I'm 47, so maybe it's just because, you know, back in the 70s, you just lied to your kids about all kinds of stuff. So you're like,
yeah,
whatever, they're not going to tell me anything I really want to know anyway. So wasn't really a big deal.
Just one more thing, throw it on the pile.
Yeah.
My mom made a comment about how, to her, the Santa Claus bit is the essence of Christmas generosity, because you're giving these things for the sheer joy of giving them and seeing the delight in the presents without taking credit. And that was an interesting view to me.
That's a wise and perspicacious way to put it. I like that.
All I can think of is Gremlins.
Oh, there's a lot, so many, like there's
Krampus.
Krampus, there's Santa's sleigh, there's all kinds of like
Oh,
Christmas-
Santa's sleigh.
Yeah, sleigh.
Silent
Yeah.
Night, Deadly Night.
Silent Night, Deadly Night, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. Like there are lots and
Wow.
lots and
I
lots.
mean, Home Alone is pretty horrific.